a heart attack. I haven't. Oh, we're live. Okay, sorry. I'm having a heart attack every day. Hi, Madison. Welcome to Venture with Grace.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
To start the show, I would love for the audience to get to know you a little bit more. So you started your career as a researcher at Facebook, and later on, you have worked at like Greycroft. You were the head of data science. I have so many questions on like the data science in the VC world too. And then you have worked on data science in a different company before you became an investor at Cosanoa, now partner at NEA. Maybe we could talk about like what were some core lessons you've learned early on in your career that kind of shaped you to who you are today.
Yeah. So I think I've had a really weird journey, which I would recommend to everyone. Everyone should take more risks and do weird things. But I think I started out at Stanford really thinking I was going to go into economics and finance. And my time there, if you ask anyone in my class, I was like the one person who knew what they were doing 100%. And I really ended up starting to take a lot more technical classes, learn more about computer science and AI and machine learning and stats, and really went that direction. And I think that was a really critical point at which I started to get more comfortable with doing hard things. And I think that was probably the most pivotal moment, was kind of pushing myself away from banking, which I had done 2 summer internships, and deciding to go into machine learning and data science, which at the time was not really a thing. Data science was brand new. So I think that was probably the most important career defining moment for me, was deciding to stay with data science, go into machine learning, and that's what drove my decision to go to Facebook, and was a very difficult first year, but have really enjoyed, having that kind of like technical foundation.
For sure. I wonder, so like I guess like maybe we'll talk about like the data science of the VC side, because I think like later on you apply the Facebook data labeling or like data science or like infrastructure skill into building your own products. And I wonder, maybe we could talk about like at a VC firm. So I feel like a lot of people would, I think a lot of VCs are tracking. So for example, so-and-so turn something into sales mode, or like, there's like, it's kind of like the sales tracker, right? So like you just like, whenever you see certain LinkedIn changes, that kind of stuff, or like scraping some sort of like news and stuff. But what are something that you felt like you were doing that's very different than like what people were thinking VCs were doing? And basically what were you doing on the data side?
Are you curious more about the, 5 years ago when I was at Greycroft, or what we're doing now? Because very different approaches.
Now it's maybe more interesting, but I'm sure like there are some kind of like things that throughout that like people were doing back then, and now it's kind of like similar.
Yeah, no, it's very true. I mean, that was actually, so I used to do research on venture at Stanford, have always been very curious about how to use data and AI for investment decision making. I think this is obviously a space that's getting a lot of attention now. But that was why I left Facebook, is I thought there was so much interesting research to be done on the investment side. I didn't understand why it wasn't more quantitative, like hedge funds. Obviously, there's always a qualitative element to that. It's never been a surprise to me. But it's something that I am very passionate about, and have both built this in the deep learning era, which was more focused on personalization and recommendation systems at Greycroft. And then now we are doing a lot of work on what we call data-driven NEA. So we do have a pretty sophisticated system internally that we've built. And really, we focus on building a multi-agent system that basically is an extension of our team, right? We very much look at this as an agent analyst that is reviewing Twitter, reviewing LinkedIn, reviewing Hacker News, reviewing all these different channels. And we have proprietary algorithms for each of those. Some of them are very sophisticated and very data intensive. Some even, incorporate traditional machine learning. But ultimately, this multi-agent system really aggregates between all these channels and has a personalized partner focused system for each for each person according to their theses, according to the deals that they're interested in. And it drives sourcing leads for them each week. It's also really interesting because I always hear this concept from people that like data is only useful in growth stages. And I actually think it's completely the opposite, to be honest. I think in growth stages, there's very clear financial metrics that you review that are captured in very simplistic analytics. I mean, maybe there's more you can do in terms of tracking, but I think there's so much unstructured data at the early stages that can be combined with structured data. So we do have a consistent system there. And a lot of other efforts around portfolio, data analytics, and just underlying data infrastructure too. That the other big piece of it is building a knowledge graph across all of our data sources, so that we're able to maintain this really strong foundation and use that in all of our data products that drive our decision making.
For sure. I wonder, so when you're thinking about like unstructured data for the early stage, I guess like what are some stuff that you're tracking? So I think there's only, I guess, like a few benchmark that, it's like which school do you go to, which I guess tech company you have worked at, or like besides the, I guess, the obvious ones, like what are some stuff that you feel like high signal? Like I'm just using like a tracking Twitter as an example, right? Let's say it's like, let's call it like, David Sachs or Jason Calacanis tweet about someone that's like ranking higher versus like, a research, like ML researcher from like Meta that should rank higher. So like what would be like a high signal kind of like situation from tracking social or unstructured stuff?
So I would say the key is not looking at this data with a blind eye. The key is having a very strong layer of personalization, because that's how we sort through all of this massive information. So, for example, we have an amazing partner, Tiffany Luck, who works at NEA, and she focuses a lot on vertical AI and has very strong theses in a few different categories. Mm-hmm. And she also has a very strong list of companies that, she's tracking, that founder profiles that she likes. So we've had her codify all of that as, a little bit more structured information and context for us. And then what we're able to do is look through all these different channels and basically identify interesting early stage signals that match those theses really strongly. So each one of them is very different. Like, GitHub, for example, is probably not something that is quite as valuable for Tiffany. It's a lot of my sourcing leads, as you can imagine. But, on Twitter, for example, we have a really interesting system set up that allows her to identify various thought leaders in the space, in different spaces that she likes. She can then see new people that maybe, or new companies that they've followed. And we also prioritize interesting ones that match her theses. So it's very unique to the channel. We're very thoughtful about trying to bake that in. Another example is like YC and NeurIPS. We do a lot of these same modularized algorithms over all the YC and NeurIPS speakers, companies, etc. And it just helps because, I don't think people realize, like, there's at minimum 15,000 people who are on the papers and posters and speakers list for NeurIPS. That would be impossible to sort through. And I've tried personally the last couple of years. But having some sense of the theses that I'm looking for, being able to match those within that space, and even understanding the types of founders that are really strong founder market fit for those theses is a good starting point to try to start kind of sifting through the needle, look for the needle in the haystack.
For sure. I want to nerd out a little bit more on the NeurIPS situation. So like, I feel like one thing that, like, so for example, you mentioned about like the who is speaking, the poster and stuff like that. So like that's obviously, like, I guess like a obvious stuff. And then I'm sure there's also a lot of like attendees, right? Like, how do you track through like do you feel like the researchers who are like featured are the people that you will end up backing, or like would you say would be like certain people who go and then like you happen to meet there are the people that you end up backing. And then I think this may be very nerdy, but like I guess when you are at a room, like let's say you have an event there, obviously you do. I mean, if anyone who is going and then listening to this, you should go to Madison's event. But I'm just saying,
That's
like,
right. Cool events coming.
yes. And then I wonder, so like for example, when you go there, like obviously you can track like people's email or something on Luma, but like what if they're in like stealth mode? Like what are some like actual tracking factor that's kind of like effective to discover the ones that who haven't been like, post on Twitter?
Yeah, no, these are amazing questions. It's this has been very top of mind for us the last month because traditionally, and I think this is the situation for everyone who attends, not just venture. Like, how do you get value out of this and find people that you want to meet and look for the theses that you're interested in? It's very overwhelming to navigate. And I think in the past, I've just thrown manual hours at it, right? Like I've spent every night for a month going into it, just like reading papers and looking for interesting people who are attending. But if you think about it, it's a very similar problem to the sourcing system, right? It's like an isolated version of that. You're going to get some of this information from Twitter. You're going to get some of it from LinkedIn. For us, like knowing all the people that are attending our events is really helpful because I also can find out, oh, this amazing startup that I've been in touch with is going, like, what a great time for us to catch up because they registered for my event. So that's a really nice starting point. But yeah, we've really tried to leverage some similar structures with data and AI to review all these different sources and see if we can prioritize. And a lot of that takes kind of this qualitative understanding of NeurIPS, such as the fact that every paper and the list of speakers that is listed, usually it's the first and second person who are the main speakers or authors, and the last person is the very famous academic professor who sponsored that research. So in my opinion, the first couple and the last are the most important. So we are able to streamline the data quite a bit through that. So it's like these qualitative things that you can bake into your algorithms that really help, that codify this subject matter expertise. And going back to your other question, I think it's such a mix. Like sometimes there's phenomenal founders leading workshops. That's the dream, right? That's easy. You can go chat with them and get to know what they're working on. It's obvious. I think more than likely that's not the case. And there's just phenomenal founders who are attending, who are also reading the research. So I try to kind of put lots of things out there. I go to all the poster sessions, I walk around, I try to read the research, I go to a lot of the speaking events, and I just try my best to line up tons of coffees and get to know everyone. It takes time though. It's your first NeurIPS is like extremely overwhelming and it just takes a lot of time to get in the weeds.
For sure. I wonder when it comes to like, I really like the detail that you break down to like, so for example, the research paper, there's like, a bunch of people writing, but like the first one, second one, and the last one are the most important. And I guess like when you're, I guess that's like part of the sourcing in terms of like diligencing the companies. I guess like one thing is like for sourcing, would you say you're the person who is meeting like 400 company per week, or would you just pick like the 4 that you feel like has the potential to go after like actual like actual time with the company?
Yeah, it's a great question, and every VC is very different, and it also really stems back to firm strategy. But at the same time, like every partner has their own approach. I would say I tend to be very outbound focused. I don't do as much. I don't love to just wait for companies to come to me. I want to be extremely rooted in my theses and the spaces that I think are going to evolve. And be very opinionated. I want to know every company and expert in that space. And have a very strong opinion as to what companies are the ones I should be meeting with. So I think that like proactive hunger is important also for younger VCs who maybe don't have this like continuous flywheel of founders coming in from even other VCs or, from like CEOs that they've worked with forever. So I definitely do a lot of kind of hunting and outbound. per my thesis areas. But at the same time, like every good VC can tell you that inbound and opportunistic founder information is really important. Like people who come into me and teach me something, that's always amazing. Like I met a company last week. When I came into it, I was like, I don't even know I'm meeting this. Like this is so out of my normal interest zone. I don't think this is something that can really take off. And the founder seemed a bit abstract for that area. And I came out of it blown away, completely new idea I'd never heard before. Our team is really excited about the idea and the deal and the opportunity right now. And it's just so, it's cool to kind of have that like 25% moment where startups are teaching you as well. But certainly I am not sourcing all the time. I am not spending most of my time just meeting new people. I think it's really important to go deep with really high signal, high potential opportunities often.
For sure. Speaking of outbound and high signal opportunities, maybe we could start with like, what is your thesis right now? And then what are something that you find interesting?
Yeah. I always am trying to maintain a number of theses that I'm very excited about. And a lot of this comes from opportunities like NeurIPS, where I'm actually really able to just get back to the AI research. Like I've been going to NeurIPS for almost 10 years now.
Wow.
And reading the research is one of my favorite things. It's probably something I do too much of. And so I do have kind of a lot of different theses areas. So obviously one of them is around the software development lifecycle. I think that's probably been the theme of my year, has been really thinking through the reinvention of software and how it is built by developers. I think vibe coding is interesting, and we're obviously seeing a big democratization of software through this, but I'm much more interested in how we serve engineers in the next era. I do not stand by the fact that I think engineering is going away. I think engineering has probably never been more important. And so something I'm very interested in that I actually published a thesis almost 9 months ago, but I think, continues to just get more important, is on the importance of enterprise code modernization and being able to not only generate code and autocomplete code, but truly autonomously improve software with the guidance of engineering support, and do this for enterprises where they have extremely complex code bases. They have very difficult legacy systems. A lot of this is tied to like baked in context. And so I led an investment in Factory this summer, which is, in my opinion, just, and the facts show this as well, that, Factory is really tackling this head on, the enterprise code mod. And they enable autonomous software development for a ton of organizations. It's really been incredible to see their progress. So they are able to reason over very complex code bases. They enable very easy migrations, refactoring. They work with lots of legacy code. It was really cool. I was speaking to the CEO, or the former CEO of Capgemini, who came to Silicon Valley a couple of weeks ago and met with tons of companies. And without knowing that I had invested in Factory, I was asking him what the most interesting company he'd met was. And he said, I met this company the other day that really talked about if they can, refactor and migrate and basically kind of liquidate your code base for engineers, make it very easy to do autonomous software development. He was like, if they can do what they say they can do, this is going to completely reinvent the way that software is built. So it was really cool to hear that validation, because I've worked with leading data science and AI and engineering teams for a long time, and I spent a lot of time working with heads of AI, heads of engineering. And I think this is the single biggest problem, to be honest. It's so incredibly difficult, and it wastes so much engineering time. So as you can tell, very passionate about this space. It's been amazing to see Factory in the works, and I think every company and all software is actually moving towards becoming more autonomous. That's going to be, I think, the theme of 2026. We're already seeing it, but I think we're going to see a big wave of, autonomous data and autonomous software development and autonomous testing, and every single category, including verticalized, are going to go through this autonomous transformation, not just agentic, but truly in the background, something that is doing work on your behalf. And then that's where the interface becomes the new challenge. And I don't think we should have a strong opinion on what that interface looks like right now, because it's evolving so incredibly quickly with the capabilities of the models. So that's one thesis area. I'm happy to go through others too. Let me know.
I would love to know about others, but like I want to, maybe we could dive a little bit deeper into the autonomous transformation space in general. So like for code, obviously, like people loves like a cursor or something because like it's kind of like help you write some code, and then you mentioned like factory is basically like it's like the next level, which is like help you generate code without you have to kind of like touch the stuff. And maybe we could talk about like the um evolution of coding. I think maybe as a non-technical person, I'm just curious about like your thoughts on these like kind of no code tools, or like the Lovable of the world. Like how are they kind of integrate with a factory to actually like productionalize your like, or like industrialize, or like I don't even know what's the right word, just like making sure your code is like kind of like you know um enterprise grade,
Yeah.
instead of like you just like vibe code it, like it's kind of like a front end product, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. That's what's been so interesting is there's this huge spectrum of tooling right now. Obviously, the vibe coding that's meant for like the most greenfield new prototype projects like Lovable and StackBlitz/Bolt, all the way to over to the more technical tools that are really meant for like full end-to-end back-end data systems, like factory, like I would put cursor a bit less technical, but more in the a little bit more no code for engineers. And yeah, I would say we're seeing a huge spectrum of front end focus. So those meant for people who are front end specialists, who maybe have that front end engineering background, but also those who don't have it. And we're starting to see, I think what's going to happen is all of these companies are going to converge. There's going to be lots of integrations. There's going to be various interfaces that work for different people. I mean, ideally, the company that wins this space probably grows extensively in those directions, but I think there will be domain expertise in a lot of different categories. But you're seeing, for example, OpenAI try to tackle kind of what I would call the middle of that space with Codex. Like their latest release was very focused on front end. I think you're able to click in to a front end and be able to edit the code there, which was really interesting because if you think about this from a Lovable all the way to a factory perspective, that would be kind of a Lovable meets factory type of perspective. And I'm starting to see some startups that are in that space too, thinking about React, thinking about, more app development, like Emergent is a really interesting one that is much more app focused and thinks a lot about kind of abstracting away the whole full stack so that it still does really complex code bases like backend development, but it is very focused on still the no code person. So yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how all of these evolve. And I think the winner will either play an incredible integration game or they will expand to own a lot of this. But there will certainly be a huge spectrum of large companies here that are serving different personas. And that is really important.
For sure. I
But
just
maybe one thing I can add too is
yeah.
I am very worried about the vibe coding era that, all of these new greenfield projects become extremely difficult to productionize, to edit, to change. I mean, I own a wine brand that I operate and I have no understanding of how to do any of the like mobile app development or like website development. I use Squarespace. It's so terrible. I would love to be able to just have like a full stack website for this. And I've tried coding this up in Lovable and StackBlitz so many times. It's great for a first shot, but trying to edit it or change it is impossible. And so if you think about real businesses that have to own this and have to edit it and change it, improve it, connect this with their backends, their products, all these different systems, like it's not feasible right now. It's absolutely not feasible.
I have so many questions on what does the backend even look like for you to, let's say you have a wine brand. You want to change stuff on Lovable, and then like beyond you, like let's say the process like you typing in your request in ChatGPT and then ChatGPT generates some sort of code and then feeding into Lovable. That's one way. Or you just putting in your request into Lovable, which is like I think it's even slower.
Yeah.
So why is it taking like 5 years for you to actually change a minor feature? Like
No,
what
it's a great
does
question.
that look like? It's not like someone rewriting the whole code while like I asked to change this button from like green to yellow or something.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Like it doesn't make sense right now, and I think that's where we're seeing companies like Emergent start to jump into the game because the whole thing is built to be full stack, very good with like it thinks like a factory ultimately, where it is very good with setting up a backend, a database, all thinks like an engineer, but it still abstracts all of that from the user. So I think the fact that Lovable wasn't architected that way to begin with is a real challenge for them now. They still have the ball. I think they absolutely might be able to rebuild a lot of it to integrate really, really well across lots of different databases for SMBs and mid-market. But it's hard, and it might require an entire rebuild of the product. So no, it's a huge issue. I think for us, I mean, my wine brand is probably the dream example of this. We're super small. I just don't care that much about how it looks. I really just want it to like work basically. Yeah, like I don't care that much. But for small businesses that it is their main, main source of income, it's something they care deeply about. You maybe have spent years setting up these like small, purchase order systems and integrating with like customer service solutions. It's not going to be possible for them to migrate and rely on this for their business.
I think it definitely is a challenge, and I wonder when it comes to like maybe sourcing a company like a factory, um, was it from Neurops or like did you kind of like what was your thesis back then? I know that you are very passionate about like finding developer tools that can be like full stack or like just like being able to I guess like convert the back end together. I don't know what's a back
Yeah.
like I guess like what's a correct word to say it, but like I guess like how do you kind of like find the company to back in time evaluate them? I'm sure they have like 5 competitors that are doing a similar-ish thing with a similar-ish profile people, and how you kind of like diligence and like picking and then eventually winning and like thinking about exit and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we spent about a year on this thesis. It had been clear to me since probably about early 2023 that the next wave from foundation models would be code gen and code development, which is so exciting. I think it's more than that too. I think there's going to be this whole shift from like even AI native to agent native, truly everything being, code gen and programmatic, because it has to be at the system level for agents to be able to operate. So a lot of that thesis was specking out the entire landscape and talking not only to all the companies thinking about enterprise code modernization and development, but also talking to heads of engineering, heads of data, heads of AI, understanding their pain points. So I did speak to tons and tons of people and put this thesis together over a very long period. And once at the time when we published it, I think it was a little bit provocative. It maybe doesn't sound as provocative now, but we published that around February, March, and the factory team we had known kind of in network for a while. And when they came in to raise their B, they were very, very excited about how aligned the thesis was with their perspective, which they felt to be very contrarian in the ecosystem too, where people are going after just a new IDE, better improvements with autocomplete, very consumer focused, when they were really thinking about autonomous improvement of your code base. So I think that alignment of thesis was really kind of the driver for both of us wanting to work together in terms of how we see the space evolving. So that was a really special one. I think, to be honest, too, a lot of it came from I really look for leaders in the developer community as well. I think that's probably one of the most important signals for me. As I've mentioned previously, I came into venture because I want to be a voice for heads of engineering, for heads of data, heads of infra. And I think it's very frustrating to me, and was frustrating to me when I was a head of data science and head of AI and infra for a startup called Thrasio. Trying to piece together the existing tools was a nightmare, and none of these tools were really built with the developer experience in mind. And I really think good software is built by developers and built by developers who like using their tools. So anyway, going back, I saw factories speaking at an AI engineering conference, at all these different keynotes across SF and the developer ecosystem, and I continue to see that is something that they just nail, is this incredible developer trust and love, to the point where people think that they are paying influencers, which is hilarious. But they really speak for the developer, and they are not they're completely okay with rebuilding the product if they are feeling it's not landing with developers. And it's not just them. I have a number of portfolio companies that really think about developer experience first, developer love. It's something I look for as a point of diligence. And I have a really exciting stealth company that I would say is probably the strongest developer trust and product market fit I've seen in the developer space. That'll be coming out soon.
Well, I'm excited for you to come on again to like talk about the new company. Maybe we could talk about I guess like the sourcing funnel from like the pre-C to C to A to B. Like, obviously factory is like a little bit like later on, but I guess like when the beginning stage, like, there's less of attraction, and obviously like, the research paper like name ranking is like very important. But is there any other things that you're paying attention to for them to raise, let's call it like the like earlier rounds of funding from?
Yeah. So I love doing super early. Most of the investments that I've made, I think most of the investments I've made in my career have been first check-in. And then, so that's primarily seed and Series A. I've done 1B, which is factory, but I definitely am very excited about working with developer founders and AI research founders from the first days. And I've done a number of incubations during my career as well with companies like Delphina, which is led by Jeremy Herman, who is the former founder of Tecton, the former founder of Uber ML Michelangelo, which is their ML ops tooling. And now he's building an agent for data science, which enables, again, autonomous improvement of your machine learning models, of your data science pipelines, of your data curation. So I think working with those early founders is definitely something that's important to me. Now, what do I look for? As I mentioned, I think there's probably a list of about 10 to 15 theses that I'm like vigorously tracking. So looking for founders who are extreme strong examples of that founder market fit for that thesis, and where they also have some strong alignment and vision. I think the best founders obviously are teaching me. And I can only have so much of an opinion as a non-builder at this point. But I think sometimes that can be demonstrated in a lot of ways. That can be a really strong developer community that they've built, or a podcast. It can be maybe they're leading a NeurIPS workshop. I mean, really cool company, Prior Labs, foundation model for tabular data. They lead a workshop every year at NeurIPS, and it's amazing to see the research community they built around data, foundation models for data, and the Tab PFN architecture. Another example too is MyoLab. They've ran a workshop at NeurIPS for like 4 years now, way before building their company. And I got introduced to them, and every NeurIPS we hang out, and I just think they're the best. So I think finding those really strong AI researchers, and then those people also bringing other network leaders into my network and trusting me with their friends, is a huge part of it. What other signals? I mean, definitely GitHub and Twitter, like looking for people who are really growing in terms of sentiment and developer love, vocalizing kind of thought leadership, all really important. I'm sure there's a lot of other signals I'm missing too, but that's a good starting point.
For sure. I wonder when it comes to, maybe you also mentioned about like, I think the fully autonomous developer experience is like the first bracket of things that you're passionate about. Like, what about like some other trends that you feel like are gonna make a difference in 2026?
Yeah.
Like everything is AI agents. So like, and then whenever I ask anyone, I think a lot of people's prediction is like AI agents still gonna be very huge next year, but I feel like it's already very like huge this year. So I don't know if there's any new kind of like terminology, whether it's like, other kind of like implementations of AI that you feel like are
I
kind
mean,
of
I actually kind of think agents are going to go out of style as a term, and it's going to become more autonomous and RL native software. That's going to be the new thing that people talk about. I mean, again, it's already a thing, but I think that's going to be the new buzzwords. But I think the spaces that I'm more excited about for 2026, data and agent memory has not gotten its moment, and it is so time. I cannot believe we've made it this far into the AI era without having a huge wave of new data tooling. And I do think it's a bit of just a market situation. Like we need a couple really phenomenal founders who can speak to the data innovation era and that really kind of capture people's hearts and minds. And I think that's going to create a big wave, both on the venture side and also the founder side of people really pushing into that space. I mean, we're already seeing it with some people focused on agent memory. I think memory will be a huge focus next year. I'm very excited about memory for enterprises in particular. As you think about how do we improve our performance of agentic applications, of autonomous applications, it's all about creating systems of record with your data that is structured, not unstructured. Unstructured data is fairly useless without the context of structured data. And so creating this memory that is accessible to an agentic system, to code gen tools that allows them to massively improve their context is going to be very beneficial to performance. And I think there's a whole wave of requirements around that, right? Like what types of data access do you get? What types of security protocols? How do you tie this with a user? How do you tie this with various groups of people? So I think, and it might even be portable, right? There's a consumer element to it where I want to have my context that's personal, but I also want to have my professional context. So there's this whole digital twin that needs to exist.
Mhm.
And what's been cool is we're seeing every major enterprise, Microsoft, Google, OpenAI, they're all building this, but they can't build it because it's only within their smaller world. So I do think there's a really big need for a third party solution here. And I don't know if we've quite seen anyone tackling the whole vision yet. There's amazing companies like Leda and Zep that are doing more of the like personal memory piece. And Zamler is one that I really am blown away by for the enterprise side, very focused in data. They build a data knowledge graph. That is more of a semantic layer that helps for the enterprise data memory, but less on the consumer side. And FalconDB is another really interesting one there, more of a GraphDB focus, but very excited about data. I really think we could also see a big revolution where the modern data stack gets killed because, I mean, it's just completely worthless. And I've been saying this for way too long. But it is so incredibly ridiculous that at this point that we're still manually building data pipelines and they're extremely batch focused, just throwing things in cold storage. I think none of this technology needs to exist anymore. We can do everything inference native, everything real time data, getting the data from the source, whether that's online or offline, even just contextualizing that with the structured metadata. And then we can actually do more more online serving of all of our applications. So again, everything's online and the data is all just being pulled from the actual source at the time that it's needed. So really some amazing companies in that space like Chalk and ClickHouse. I think there's a lot up and coming as well. So anyway, that's my data push. We need more data founders in 2026.
For sure. I wonder, so like you mentioned about like the modern data stack is dead, but like what does a new data stack kind of like look like for you?
Yeah.
And what kind of data tooling are you kind of looking for?
So I think there's going to be a couple pieces of this. On the warehouse level, the storage level, I think we're going to try not to store data as much as possible, right? Like only when it's necessary or for regulated industries when we need snapshots. But right now, everything defaults to batch and cold storage. And then you just end up with piles and piles of useless data. I don't remember the exact stat, but someone told me a while ago, it was like 95% of our data is not used. It's just thrown into storage because one day you're going to use it, right? Mm-hmm. So what if we started from a point of only useful data being leveraged and letting that be an agent that goes to access that data with qualitative and semantic context. So I think there's probably three parts, right? There's the semantic layer, which you could call the memory as well. It's basically the same thing. Then there's the actual retrieval piece of this. And the retrieval, I hate the term retrieval. I think there's so much buzz around that and it just doesn't make a ton of sense to me. It's all more of it's ultimately a pipeline, right? And that could include Gen AI. It could include feature engineering. It can include some of those transformations that need to happen to this data for it to be served. I think Chalk is a really, really good example of what this could look like in practice. And I'm not an investor in Chalk. I'm just a major fangirl. And then the bottom layer, I think, is more of this like programmatic data warehouse or data lake. And that might also look very verticalized. Like we're seeing verticalized data mesh become a little bit more popular right now. Companies like Otter that do note taking, they have a verticalized data mesh, and it's very structured in nature, but you can use it with other systems as a developer. I have a company called Foresight that does private markets data mesh with a knowledge graph. And it's the same thing. They add this structure and context to it so that it's programmatic, but then I can also query it from other places. But on a horizontal level, I really love companies like Bowplan that are programmatic. They make data work like software so that you can code, you can code with it. You can bring this Git nature to data. And I think that is just going to be a requirement.
Wow. I wonder, so like you mentioned about another things that I thought was like very interesting was like you mentioned about like the digital twin. So like when you mentioned like data layer, we have or like the context and memory layer. So like I have invested in a company called Hyperspell.
I love Hyperspell. Connor's the best.
Oh yeah, like so.
Shout out to Connor.
Yeah, he's like I feel like he's a king at like sales and like all these like kind of like GTM stuff.
Yes.
Another thing is like last week I have a repeat guest, like so he was a founder of Live Person and it's a public company. Now he is he founded a company called Your AI. So that's basically like his company entire idea is kind of like creating your digital twin.
Yeah.
But I guess like when I was chatting with him, I was like reflecting to myself. I feel like, do I really like? I mean, like I feel like I think the whole concept was like you kind of like live your own. Currently, your data is all uploading onto ChatGPT, and then it's not very personalized. But like when you storage your own data, and there is a lot of like whether it's advice or like some other stuff that can like be very personalized for you. So I guess when you're thinking about digital twin, like what does that mean for you? And then are you talking about like my work data that like my thousands of podcasts like all mashed together in like a data storage. And as you mentioned, like, you know, I shouldn't storage every episode. I guess like I just storage the important information. I guess,
Absolutely.
what does it look like to pick the important information of stuff?
Yeah, it's one of the most important questions to think about. And it's so funny because I used to work at Facebook on the ad auction, on personalization, and during the Cambridge Analytica days. That was actually about a month after I started. So it's so funny because even back then, this was like so much of where I thought the world was going, was like, why don't we just give people ownership of their data and let them tell us when they want to use it in what applications? And I very much think that's where we'll end up, is giving people as much ownership and control as to the level of personalization they want in different experiences. The benefit being, you know, there's obviously a trade-off, and it's like privacy versus experience and like level of usefulness. And that dates all the way back to the Facebook ad auction, and there dates way before that as well, and Yahoo and cookies, etc. And we're going to see the same thing now. I just think we now actually kind of have the capability to do this because you know, generative systems enable us to really kind of understand more qualitative characteristics about companies and people. So I think the like technically most accurate version of this would be like a knowledge graph that allows you to deeply capture all of the information in your lives as entities. Like, who are my friends? Who are my work colleagues? Who are the companies I work with? What are all the connections between them? All of that is this extremely multifaceted network-based data. And that information is extremely important to enable personalization. But as you can hear, there's so many elements of it that are more sensitive, like, you know, who are all the people in my lives? What are all their social security numbers? What are their birth dates, right? And those are things that my like birth date, I want all my friends to know. But maybe my social security number should never be known, only for very secure government access. So I'm talking in a very theoretical manner, but I think, again, with this whole memory and personalization layer, that's hopefully very portable and usable, comes this very secure, comes these like very important improvements to security and data control. And, you know, I think enables some level of human interface in terms of like innovation, in terms of how people are able to control this information. I think there's a lot that we can do that is fairly, you know, really teaching the whole world about how to own and manage their data. And that's a pretty cool and powerful subject, but, you know, it's a huge change.
I'm about to ask like one of the dumbest question of all time, but what is knowledge graph? Is that like, I mean, I've seen these like, you know, tree-ish graph, like of like, you know, this is like how the decision is made, or like basically there's like a decision tree or something. Is that knowledge graph, or like what does that entail?
So knowledge graphs have been around for a very long time, first off, for all my knowledge graph people, my Neo4j's fan base of the world.
Actually, the Neo4j founder is coming on our show. I know I subscribe.
Tell him
I do huge research right before this.
That man, no one has done more work for the data world than Neo4j. They have been around for 19 years. They've been a believer in knowledge graphs since the early days, and they deserve their moment. But it's also time to be replaced. So no, a knowledge graph, there's like two aspects to it, right? I think there's the theoretical concept, and then there's in practice. It's kind of like memory, right? Like everyone talks about these vague or retrieval. There's a lot of vague concepts, but ultimately in practice, this isn't a like technically, there's something that is a knowledge graph and something that is not a knowledge graph. So I'm talking about this on a very theoretical level. Knowledge graph is basically a way of organizing your data that is highly graphical and network oriented in nature. So it allows you to capture your knowledge as a graph that is not just flat in nature, right? Like data, for the most part, in the last 10, 20 years has been two-dimensional. You capture, you know, an entity. So say I'm like capturing company data, I have all these companies, and then I just have attributes about those companies. That's two-dimensional. Graphs allow you to define tons of different entities and all their connections to other entities. So Facebook, for example, is built on a knowledge graph. Google is built on a knowledge graph. Apple, every one of the big tech companies have graphical data underlying. And if you think about Facebook, that would be each company that advertises or has a page on Facebook has one, each person, all their different hierarchies. So all their friends, they're connected to all their friends, all the companies that they interact with, their Instagram profiles, like all of these different entities are connected. And then we're able to do n degree levels of personalization because you understand all the hierarchies of relationships. So the level of big data that you're able to create from a knowledge graph is so much more accurate, and it's so much more dynamic because you're capturing this as basically like a real world model. So I love knowledge graphs, and I think it's where we need to head. However, in practice, there's a lot of ways in which you can kind of create knowledge graphs, and some are more technically accurate than others. But I would say almost every startup that comes in today, almost all of them are built on a knowledge graph. Amazing companies, Rio.dev, Hyperspell, Foresight. I mean, there's so many companies. Basically, any applied AI company is working with some variant of a knowledge graph today.
For sure. Clarify. I think it was another executive, not the founder himself from Neo4j, but yeah, I don't want to butcher anything.
Well, they'll get to, they deserve their moment on knowledge graphs. But it is also a very old product and, adds a lot of latency. So I think Neo4j has had its moment and hopefully gets to go public or something, but we're looking for the new graph companies.
The new graph companies. I wonder for, let's say, like for a company to go public, as you mentioned, like I think like the evolution of these kind of like product when they, from them inventing a word to like for them to IPO, I feel like you have to continuously evolve. And what's your thought on like the exit positioning for like a lot of these like AI companies? Because I mean, I don't want to like comment if we're in a bubble or not, because that's just sounds like very cringe. But I guess like, what's your thought on like how do you think about exit when you're looking at these companies?
Yeah, no, I love that question. Thank you for framing it that way. I'm so sick of the AI bubble commentaries. It's so much more about how do you create healthy exits and liquidity for companies and for founders and for LPs and for all the people in this ecosystem. And I do think that's a big part of thinking through terms, pricing, valuation for companies today, being really thoughtful about how markets can change. I think we're going to see a lot of companies foundation model companies try to go public next year, as we've heard with Anthropic and OpenAI, lots of rumors of them pushing to go public. And I think that could go okay, or it could go really badly, and it could really reset some of the pricing on the startups. So one, I think I admire that we're trying to push more into IPOs in public markets. I think it's going to be really important. And it's also, unfortunately, a little bit of the scenario with the way that OpenAI, Anthropic, the foundation model companies have set themselves up. It's to be extremely capital intensive. There's just not a lot of private capital for them to access anymore. Meanwhile, like companies like Databricks have a very sustainable business. They don't have this really strong need to go public. I'm speaking very much as an outsider versus, with all the public information available. So I think every founder needs to be thinking about what are the paths to an exit for my company? How do I set myself up at each round to be in a good position to ensure that I'm not setting up my employees, my investors, my shareholders for bad situations? How do I make sure I'm truly calibrated with what I truly think my company is worth? But I do think we're going to see a big shift back into the public markets next year. And I think we're going to see a lot more creativity and innovation around M&A and exit opportunities, even going beyond to M&A. as you're seeing lots of new VCs thinking about creative ways of, doing participating in the secondaries. We had like the whole SPAC wave a couple years ago. Like, we're going to see creative approaches to liquidity, especially just because LPs are not getting their money back right now. Everything's stuck in the private markets, and that's really, really important to ensure a healthy venture ecosystem that is evolving and returning capital.
For sure. I wonder what's your thought on, like, I guess like the current benchmark they have to hit for each level of like, I guess like the when they need to raise the next round, basically. And then this will be the last question before we hop into a fire round. I know that.
Yeah, no worries. You're saying for startups, how do they think about setting themselves up for a next round?
Yeah. So basically, what are some benchmark for, I guess, the second round, the third round, and yeah.
So this is something that I spend a lot of time with all of my companies on in diligence, and really make sure that we feel comfortable that this round sets them up for that, and that this valuation sets them up for that as well. Even in downside cases, in upside cases, it is a pure fact that there's no company that has gone through every single fundraise at every round and that it's ever just been an easy way all the way through. It's always up and down. Maybe OpenAI is the exception, but we're going to see where that goes. So I think a big part of it is thinking through milestones on usage, ARR, customers, product development. It's not just about a simple like ARR milestone. It's about what is the evolution of your product and how that aligns with your customer segments. You need a balance between enterprises, mid-market. I mean, one example, one of my companies right now has this opportunity to displace a legacy solution. And so we spent a lot of time last night actually talking about the trade-off between some ACV decrease, average contract value, and then the opportunity to grab a lot more market share. And so you have to be creative about really thinking through how to balance all of these different opportunities. So yeah, we think a lot about just making sure valuation is fair and using public information for that, private, thinking about what milestones we feel really confident they can hit and which ones might be possible upside scenarios. We do a lot of that internally, is all these different scenarios of where this company can go and continually re-estimating our thinking there and re-estimating where we think the true valuation sits.
For sure. I want to be mindful of time. Maybe we wrap with a quick fire round for you.
Sounds good.
What's your favorite book?
Oh, The Prediction Machine.
Wait, what is it about? No, I'm writing this down.
It's about the economics of AI.
Oh, wow.
Written way before Gen AI.
Wow. I'm excited to read like what historically people are thinking about today. So who would you invite to your dinner party?
Oof. Okay, I think Condoleezza Rice. And the reason is that she's so cool because she not only is a badass professor at Stanford, was obviously very involved in politics, but is just extremely technical and an innovator in her field. She's also on the board for Stanford football, which I'm obsessed with. So I just appreciate her being a badass.
Oh my God, love. So who would you invite to your dinner party?
Who would I invite to my dinner party?
Wait. Yeah, sorry. Who made the biggest impact in your career? Sorry, my brain is literally dead today. I wrote it down and I was like, wait, that's content rice. Sorry.
Biggest impact on my career. I have to give this to my first manager at Meta, Facebook at the time, Matt Stone. He is a badass. He is currently now the head of RL at Anthropic. And he taught me everything I needed to know about machine learning, but also about managing people and the importance of quality and showing up with ROI and value for people in all scenarios. major he's a huge inspiration.
Love that. Where can we find you outside of work?
Find more of my work.
Where can we find you outside of work?
Oh, outside of work. Okay, great. So as I mentioned, I own a wine label, and
You want to plug your wine label down here?
it's
Rancho.
Rancho.
The website is not ready, but yeah, go for
No,
it.
the website's up. It's just using Squarespace. There's no vibe coding happening in my wine label, although I wish there was. If someone can make a new wine label website for me, I'll be blown away with the vibe coding tools because I've tried. And so I do love to go up to Sonoma. My family has had a ranch up there for about 5 generations.
Wow.
So we've been there since the 1800s, and I love going up there. I also used to perform in rodeos growing up, so I love riding Western and trying to get out there on trail rides. And I'm currently doing my private pilot's license training too.
Wow. Such a well-rounded answer for this question. Wait, what?
I have a lot of hobbies.
I love that. Well, Madison, thank you so much for coming on the show today. It was such a fun conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. Always love your show.
Thank you. Let me quickly end stream one second. Okay. Also